Welcome to another episode of Lessons from Last Time. This week on the podcast, I have Anita St Pierre. And first of all, thank you for joining me, Anita.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
This is a great interview. I already know it's going to be awesome just because we've talked very little, but from what I know about you, you've got a ton of experience. And when we do these podcasts, we always try to find somebody who's been through things that then everybody can learn from those things that somebody's been through. And so you've been through a lot in this mortgage industry. And I just want to pull out some of those gems from your history and your experience. So take us back to how long have you been in the mortgage industry?
Gosh, I started right out of college with one of the mortgage insurance companies. And so that puts me pretty close to 40 years.
Wow, 40 years.
40 years.
And when you got in mortgage insurance, so I'm thinking about, all right, we're in the 80s at this point. So late 70s, early 80s. So when you got in, what was your job with the mortgage insurance company?
At the time we were going through a refi boom. So coming straight out of college, I knew absolutely nothing, didn't really even know what a mortgage was, at the time. So they took me in as an entry level kind of customer service position, and then quickly moved me to underwriting.
Okay, cool. So you were given a job of, kind of a desk job then at that point. And you're underwriting files immediately out of college. What was your degree in?
Yeah, Spanish, to be honest with you.
Your degree was in Spanish?
Yeah.
You're not going to Guatemala with me. Oh my gosh, we could use you.
Not really. It's funny, in my semi-retired state, it's one of the things I'm working to get back is I can still understand it pretty well, but I cannot, I'm really slow at the gate, trying to come out and speak again.
Okay.
That's my to-do list, Ken.
Nice.
Yeah.
So how do you go from Spanish degree into mortgage insurance? That doesn't seem like a natural jump.
If you rewind it, I was the first person in my family to have a college degree at all. I probably should have majored also in economics, but in all honesty, I hated it. I went to a liberal arts school in Massachusetts, which is, and that's where I'm from. And, it was just a thing, right? I didn't like economics, and I don't think they had a business degree at the time. I'm sure by now they offer one, but at the time, Spanish was my thing. I always had an aptitude for foreign language, and I enjoyed it. I thought maybe I'd go into some sort of international business role. My dad wanted me to go into the FBI or something cool like that, but use that second language for part of my job. It never happened, by the way.
Yeah. Were you like top grades in high school, kind of take your pick kind of a person?
I was a good student, could have been better. I was a little bit lazy. I found a way to kind of skirt the things that I didn't like to do. I was really not well versed in history. I remember one of my history classes was, the history of what happened in Salem Village back in the witchcraft days type of thing. But, for the most part, I would always go towards the liberal arts stuff. I loved Shakespeare. I loved reading. I loved all those types of things. But had I been a little bit mature at a younger age and less afraid, I think, of venturing into things that I wasn't comfortable with, I would have done things differently. But I think most of us feel that way, right? As you look backwards.
It's interesting though that you say that because you jumped into something. How were you comfortable with jumping into mortgage insurance and underwriting with a Spanish degree? It just seems like that was something that would have been very different for you.
I don't know if I came out with an economics degree, if I would have felt any differently about going into a mortgage related business and, understand even what a mortgage is and what does underwriting entail. So honestly, I think, the aptitude comes with just, immersing yourself into something new, and you learn as you go. In all fairness, I wish I had sort of joined the organization when there was more time to get a thing called training. So, they taught me the bare bones and said, be off and underwrite these loans for us.
Do you remember back then how many women were in leadership positions at your company or around your company?
I wouldn't say tons, but there were women leaders. It was still predominantly male, but there were women leaders.
So you get in, you're at this point, and I'm going to ask a few questions as we go, because I think you've just climbed in the mortgage industry, and it's fun to watch you in that leadership position. And we've at the Mortgage Bankers Association conferences, we always talk about stale, frail, male, and pale. That the industry is still dominated by older white males. In fact, we did some interviews here with like 4 people in a row, and my content team was like, "Hey, could you get us one that's not a bald white man?" And I was like, "Oh yeah," but it really is. There's a lot of that. So I do want to kind of bring that into this conversation a little bit as we go. But so you get in mortgage insurance, you get in as an underwriter. How long did you do that?
I did that for 3 or 4 years. I was making a commute into Boston, and the commute was terrible. And I had the pleasure of working for all kinds of different companies, and there was a job opportunity to move a little bit more locally into a retail space. And I decided to make that move, save a lot of time and money on commuting, because at the time salaries weren't great, and I'm quite sure it was a salary jump, because that would have motivated me appropriately too to move. And I'm going to be honest with you, that was my most embarrassing transition, because I came thinking, I kind of know what I'm doing. Here I am. Because when you underwrite a loan for mortgage insurance, it's very different than being in the nuts and bolts in a retail organization. So I got there, and I was, it was a promotion of sorts. I was going to be a senior underwriter. I had only done conventional loans, and all of a sudden I needed to jump in and start doing government loans as well. And I realized pretty quickly how little I knew. And so that was the job that really was the early turning point of really learning how to do things. Now, that was well before AUS ever was even, I'm sure it was in the works, but was even present. So, you learn to underwrite with a giant manual in front of you. So that's where I needed to swallow my pride, take a big step backwards, and start again.
Mm-hmm.
But it was one of the better lessons.
Yeah, as a senior level. So like you.
No, I wasn't a senior anymore.
Okay, gotcha.
I got moved back.
Oh, really?
I did. I felt like I got, sent back a grade in school. It was really one of my first epic failures, early in my career. But, good things happen sometimes.
So you just humbled yourself and went, I guess I'll just build.
I had to. I didn't know what I was doing. And it was really apparent even to me, but it was still pretty embarrassing. A lesson I took with me, later in life.
Yeah. Did you, I don't know if you remember this, but did you, when people would come to you and ask questions you didn't know, would you go, "Hey, let me get back to you on that"? Or would you like try to find an answer and then they would find out that you didn't know what you're talking about? Or like, how did you manage, your knowledge level not being where you wanted it to be, but you still can't stop people from running things by you?
It's funny because like in the first job, I had one particular person I would ask questions of, and he was always there to help me and guide me. And to this day, we've always held each other, quite honestly, in high regard. And so if it wasn't something I could find easily enough in a book, because we went to books to find guideline things, I would ask somebody else. I think we learn well from other people and their knowledge. But, as I said, I always am one to try to find the source, the answer, and when I carried further into my career as an underwriter, because that's really my roots, I used to try to find things in writing, because when you read what's written, you can tell when things are absolute based on the way something's written versus the word generally, which gives you that little bit of wiggle room sometimes when it makes sense.
Yeah, it is funny. When I was a loan officer, I would always basically I studied the guidelines, read guidelines every day. I knew my guidelines more than most underwriters. Mm-hmm. And so I used to look at other loan officers going, it's not a secret. Like, unless it says generally, unless it says, a compensating factor, whatever, it's not a secret what the guidelines say. They're right there. And they didn't even change that much back then. And so I was like, why are you guys not reading this? Why would you let an underwriter tell you no? You shouldn't have asked the question. You should have known it was a no. And so we made underwriters do our job, which then wasted everybody's time.
Well, it kind of happens that way because it's harder to remember a question you ask somebody and you get the answer, because you get what you need in the moment, but you don't necessarily remember. Mm-hmm. I agree with you. And that's what when I even correlate that now to when the younger generation today looks things up online because they can get the answer right away. Do you retain it or do you kind of lose it because you didn't have to dig to find it? I don't know. I think, it remains to be seen, but it sure is handy.
Oh yeah. Well, and if you read it for yourself, the problem with the answer online is you didn't read the document. You just got that one answer you were looking for.
Got the one answer. And it can be taken out of context.
Right. And you don't know why. You don't know why something exists. You're just like, oh, it is this way. And I'd rather memorize why it's that way because that will help me understand, the rest of the process.
Yeah, and that's right. And if a lot of times, like throughout my life, and I still do that today, and I know it probably drives some people crazy, specifically like my fiance who has to live with me. He, I always ask why. Because if I ever have to explain it again, if I don't get the root cause or the root reason for something being what it is, it's, I can't support an answer I give, especially once you get into leadership, you have to understand the why.
Yeah. Okay. So you get through underwriting. How did that build go to that next level?
So I ended up becoming a senior underwriter in that organization. I did make my way back. Had to learn a lot along the way in, FHA, VA, and any kind of local products that we might have been doing, like mass housing. And then I became a senior underwriter. Then I took a little bit of a sabbatical, had my first child. And then when I got back into the working world, which was then after my second child, I went back to contract underwriting and was definitely, if not the first, among the first people to work from home. It was another refi boom, and I worked for it was MGIC at the time. No, it wasn't United Guaranty at the time, as a contract underwriter from home. It was something I needed to do because my son had cranial surgery and couldn't go to any kind of daycare. So my need to work from home was real. But so was the need out in the outside marketplace. So I had tons of work to do. And I set up an office in my house, and we were in the very early adoption of some computer ability to work remote, but it was still paper at that time. So these were paper files with paper approvals. And we did have fax machines back then. We used those. And aside from that, it gave me the ability to work. At that point, I was a single mom raising two kids at home. So it's been a journey.
I have to ask, what was that like to decide when it was right for you to go back? How did you make that decision?
Oh, it was, I'm going to tell you, it was probably the hardest thing ever to admit, even today. It's the biggest source of shame and embarrassment for me, but I know it happens. I had a very abusive marriage and lived in it for as long as I could. And once that ended, I found myself a single mom and, needed to get back to work stat, but then had that challenge with my son, just having had cranial surgery that he needed. And so, fortunately, I had people in the business who knew me and took a chance on me, and it worked out really well.
You opened up so much there. Thank you for sharing that. But you've opened up a line of questioning now where
that's okay.
When we were in college, my wife was getting her master's and volunteered at the Denver Safe House, which was a house for women who'd been in abusive situations. And I can remember the conversations we would have at home when she would come home, and it would break her heart every time somebody, they fled to the safe house for protection, and then watching people go back because they didn't have the ability, the resources, the friends, the family that could help them stay out of that abusive situation. And it would just break her heart every time somebody would go, he's not going to do it again, and go back. And here you are in the mortgage industry. You had been successful as an underwriter. You'd grown to senior underwriter. You're in this there's a whole other story that people don't know.
Mm-mm.
Now it comes to a head and you just go, I'm going to have to figure this out.
Yeah. Quickly. Yeah. It was a lot. I look back, it's so funny because I look back on that point in my life, almost like from an omniscient point of view. Like surely that was somebody else's life at the time, because I've grown very far from that. So whenever you are in those types of situations, I think women who live through that, first of all, it's not something I never talked about it. It's embarrassing, I think it would be tempting for people to make judgments on it. But when people are involved in abuse, there's a lot of reasons. But I think in many cases, it's insidious. It happens over a period of time. And then all of a sudden, you wake up one day and you say, goodness, how did I get here? It's messed up. But, at the end of the day, you don't come out the same person on the other side of it when you finally get to the other side of it. And I know until really recently, I always thought it was one of my biggest weaknesses, until somebody who I have a great deal of respect for actually said, once I started sharing my story, that it was actually my source of strength. And now that I'm a little bit older, not so much in the corporate America role right now, it's something that's very close to my heart and something I really want to do some good work in, with the time that I have. Mm-hmm. I feel very strongly that, I hope if I can change one person's life for the better, or give that one person who feels less than or hopeless, or that, how do you get to that other side? I'd love to be involved in something like that. That would be important to me.
It's such a good perspective, because you just go and, like, for me, when I see when things are tough and things happen that are just really difficult to overcome, or I'm hit with something that I've never had to deal with before, my first thought is, this is so good because somebody's going to need me to go through this, come out the other side, and tell my story.
That's what I'm hoping. I want to use my story for good, for sure.
You're doing it. So you get back in, you go contract. Mm-hmm. You had friends. So you had friends in the industry, which I've always said, this industry, I mean, it brings people together, right? So you had some strength in your friends. Your friends, gave you that next opportunity. You get in, you're doing contract, you're just working, I would imagine, a lot of hours if it's during a boom.
It was during a boom, and being at home helped me a ton because I could work kind of off hours. So we depended on the FedEx schedule at the time, and I was working for National City, and it was before it was National City, it was AccuBank, I think, and I could drive there if I ever missed like the regular pickup and drop off, and I'd pick up my next load and bring it home. And, so I worked kind of around the clock, to be honest with you, a lot of odd hours, but it didn't matter. It just gave me the latitude I needed, where I was in my life at the time. I am forever grateful. Forever grateful.
So you're managing, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. So it's all good. And, so from there, as the kids got older, I went on to a company that had offered me a different type of opportunity that was really my first leadership role. And that was, it was actually a company, I'm trying to remember now how this went. But they wanted me to build out a division of a subprime lender. And for the life of me, I cannot come up with a company's name. But anyway, it was my first opportunity to do that, sort of in a branch manager role. And I was kind of feeling my way around that a little bit. And, and that just definitely was going to be a slow climb. It was a tough thing to do, but I had, at the time, at least up north, branch managers were sort of in control of, they were managers of both sales and underwriting in the operations piece. So the operations piece, I had a good grasp on. But this, trying to recruit salespeople and be a salesperson and then kind of go over here and do this, and then having been an underwriter, I think I had myself involved with too many hats on at the same time. But that kind of got me as far as 2008, and we all sort of know what happened then.
If you are watching this podcast and you're in the mortgage industry and you haven't checked out the Knowledge Coop, you definitely need to dive into the Knowledge Coop. In there, you will find content and community that will help you grow as an individual by learning everything there is to know about the mortgage industry. If you think you know everything, just dive in and take some classes, because there's always something more you can learn. To be successful in this business, you've got to continually learn. In addition, if you're a company and you want to teach your people in your own environment, we've got that in the Knowledge Coop Enterprise Services. So reach out to us, check out knowledgecoop.com, definitely join Coop Plus. Let's get back to the podcast.
And so in 2008, it was actually 2007 for me, the company I was working for had cross-collateralized two different companies. They had kind of mixed in their A paper and B paper, but anyway, they were one of the casualties of the mortgage meltdown, the beginning of the mortgage meltdown. So I found myself saying, okay, now what? So I ended up getting a phone call one day from one of my people in one of the other mortgage insurance companies. And they said, hey, we have an opportunity, an underwriting job for a small company in Tennessee. Do you want to do it? And I said, well, sure. And again, I had to swallow my pride. And I felt like I had gone back again and had to kind of go back to my roots. But at the same time, I was pretty grateful. And so I got on a plane and I needed to come down to Franklin, Tennessee. And that was 2007, where I met one of my favorite people in the industry, Tommy Williams, who was at Franklin American Mortgage. At the time, Franklin American Mortgage was really small. It was a really small deal. And it was wonderful to be here. I had the first taste of Southern hospitality. And then also they then started to wonder, well, who is this girl from Boston? She sure has a lot to say and a lot of opinions, I'm sure. And so, so they had always done things a certain way, and it was really working for them. But I think that they had their sets, their eyes, their eyes toward the future, and were hoping for some growth. And so Tommy had introduced me to a salesperson at the time, and they said, we'd love for you to be our ops manager in the Northeast. Just be patient, get to know who we are, and when the time is right, we get the right salespeople, we'll make this happen. And honestly, they were true to their word, and I got to know how they did things, and it started to grow. And at the same time, I was supporting some of the local talent from the Northeast, and they could see that it was really a viable place to do business. And before I knew it, January, it was go time that following year. So 2008, if you can imagine, Franklin American Mortgage opened the Northeast. So we would call people, some people I knew from Nat City, the Nat City contract days. So we got a team together, about 12 of us, and put together a little branch in the Northeast. And then at the time Dodd-Frank started, we needed to get licensed and got individual state licenses, and the rest was history. And so we grew a great little operation center up there.
Had you moved to Tennessee?
I physically live here now, but I didn't at the time.
So you were still up in the Northeast. So building something was going to
Boston.
You are. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So then you launched, now you're back to, operating. So again, you took 2 steps back, and then you figured out the climb, and then you just climbed back up.
That's right. Yeah. Wow. So I've had a couple of detours, but at the same time, not for long. I've really been fortunate, truly blessed, and that they've always ended up kind of keeping me on track. And I've also been blessed when people said they were going to do something, they did. But at Franklin, they always had kept sales and operations separate, which, it was different than what at the time I was used to in the Northeast, but I see very clearly, I think it's the right thing to do.
Good idea.
Yeah, it's a good idea. So I chose the operation side. It's where I was most comfortable. And I had been underwriting for them for some time, got to know who they were and, really kind of grew with the times with all the things that we had to change technology wise and certainly compliance wise. There were tons of changes there. So yeah, we really grew up to probably 60 people in that one ops center. And at that point, there were 4. There was one out in California, Tennessee, and Texas. But the Northeast held its own. Yeah.
Were you in charge of hiring a lot of those people?
I was.
So how did you do that you're building something, you're growing fast in a bit of a crazy market. We just had come out of this massive crash and now you're going to grow this. How did you grow it and hold culture in that company? I know it's hard to go from 0 to lots. So how did you do it right?
There were so many great people available.
Mm.
It's the truth. People needed jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my opinion, we were able to pick some of the top talent as far as the operations staff were concerned. And we had already been growing that Northeast through a couple of different account executives who were really prolific. One was out of InterFirst. I'm bringing up old school places. And then one had been with Franklin for some time, and he was out of Connecticut. And so we were doing a bunch of Connecticut and Massachusetts business. And then we got, kind of filled in the rest of the Northeast and just kept kind of growing it person by person. And then we had a group when Bank of America, one of the times when Bank of America exited wholesale, we picked up a group from Bank of America. It was led by Matt Langley, and he's actually still with Citizens today. Because as you know, Citizens owns Franklin, the old Franklin wholesale. So Matt came on with a group of several.
Okay. So you built because there were people available. And I love that you said that because there's right now, I had a friend say, in the beginning of layoffs, you trim the fat and then you start cutting into the meat. And so you get these amazing people that you don't want to let go of. And those people become available. And I just actually read a list of all the companies that started at the very tail end of the Depression. And they are all companies you still know. They're still some of the greatest and largest companies in America. But they started because at that time, there were available people who you couldn't get otherwise. And so you were just like, we're going to grow. Who wants in? And you started gathering together some of the best people who had to be let go from former jobs or left former jobs.
Exactly. We had really top-notch people, and Dan Crockett owned Franklin American. I think he had a vision for some growth and then of course his leadership team. And it really made it possible for us to do what we did. It was exciting. I was, really glad to be part of it.
What was your title at that point?
I was vice president of operations, the Massachusetts region.
Wow. How does that end up? How do you transition out of Franklin?
I was with Franklin for just under 12 years, 11 years and change. And I loved it there. It was great. So when Dan sold the company to Citizens Bank, there were some closures, a couple of the operations centers closed earlier in. And then I hung in there for a few months with my group. And it was in November. There was a pretty significant reduction in force across, several areas. And so our operations center was shut down.
What year was this?
This was 2019.
Wow. Okay. So that happens when I have to know, were you like, I guess I'll go get a basic underwriter job again and like build back up. What was your reaction to that?
I'll never forget that day. I had been at a wedding that weekend. So I was up in the mountains and I got a phone call early saying, "Hey, I'm really sorry. This is going to take place." And I was like, "I'm not in the office." They said, "Well, I know, but these people will come, they'll handle it." And I really didn't want my team to think I was too chicken to be there and kind of face that with them. So I jumped in the car and drove down, and I got there after the news had been broken, but I did get there later on that morning. And as I was pulling into where our office was in Massachusetts, having raced all the way down like a 2.5 hour ride, I got a phone call saying, "Hey, how you feeling?" I said, "I'm okay." Because I knew it was coming. You could kind of feel it, you kind of get that feeling. And I said, "I'm feeling all right." They said, "Well, I'm working on something, hang tough. I'll be in touch with you in a few days when I have a little bit more information. So don't worry. I think I've got something for you and some of your group." Great. So I kind of knew again, somebody had my back and forever grateful. So I went in and spent the day with our team, and they were professionals, they were polite, they were troopers, and we were able to take several of that group onto the next gig.
What do you say when you walk in the door, knowing what had just happened? Morale is, I mean, it's got to be so tough in that room. The air had to be thick. Like, as a leader, what do you say in that moment?
Well, I got to tell you, I just remember walking in, and I think it surprised people because we were busy, so I don't know that everyone saw it coming, and I don't know that I did, quite honestly, but being part of the layoff too, we were pretty tight. We all went out to lunch that day. We all kind of took over a restaurant and went out to lunch and, ordered pizza, had a beer, and just spent the time together. And I think a lot of us are still really, fairly close to one another. Those were good years. So I think a lot of us just embraced each other, and, we all pretty much felt the same way. But it was a day of loss for sure. But, we didn't have people who were angry or anything. People were bummed out because it was the end of a good thing. It really was.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is, knowing what you know now, that happens right before the biggest refi boom in the history of the United States.
It sure
So
did.
amazing.
Yeah.
So, did you get the phone call saying we're putting something together and let's talk?
Yeah, and I got a call later on that day, and it wasn't something that really could be discussed in any kind of detail. But he said, take some time off, shake it off, and I'll be in touch with you soon.
Wow.
Because that same person was impacted as I was.
So, already back up on their feet, like, let's figure this out.
Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly. So I ended up starting with Guaranty Trust before it became Guaranty Home, technically December 31st, 2019. So I was laid off for about 40 days.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And so you started in what capacity?
I don't even know. I couldn't tell you what. It was basically, I guess, to run a mortgage operations in the Northeast. So I think we probably brought 10, or it might have been 10 or 12 of us all in from the original Franklin group. And at the time, Guaranty Trust was the mortgage arm of the wholesale arm of Volunteer State Bank. Volunteer State Bank is a fairly small bank, regional bank here in Nashville area. And I'm not sure that they really knew why we were here, and we certainly didn't really know why, what we were doing there. So it was kind of a weird couple-month transition. But then there were some changes in leadership, and it became more apparent once I was more included in some of the conversations that were happening, that the vision of the new owner of the bank Volunteer State Bank, who was Galen Lawrence Jr., wanted us to grow this entity and lift it from the bank and have it become an independent mortgage company. Mm-hmm. That was kind of a big deal because that meant that we had to get all of the individual state licenses. We weren't going to be registered people. We had several people who needed then, all your salespeople then needed to go take all the licensing and all that type of stuff. So that was a process that was probably from April, and it happened in August. So we ended up, whenever that day was, let's call it August 1st of maybe I'm
20
off a year. Yeah, it's 19. So it's 19. I guess it was 18 that I started that day. So 19. So we had to kind of build up some infrastructure, do a whole lot of that preparedness as far as licensure goes. We had to have a name change because trust is not a word you can use in a lot of the states. And I can't remember exactly how many states we started with that day, when we just kind of took our pipeline, made sure we had every license for every loan we had, and lifted it, just kind of pulled it out. And you had to let all your agencies know, you had to get VA, FHA approvals as a different entity. So it was a really great experience to be involved in so much of that.
Is that when you moved to Tennessee?
I moved sometime later because, it was during that time I was traveling 3 weeks of the month back and forth because we were really trying to meld different groups. We had Guaranty Trust Legacy, and then we had some of the Franklin American people, and then Santander Bank, went to an all retail model. So we picked up several people from there. And then we also then opened an operations center up in the Philly area. So we were on this really big growth trajectory all at the same time. So I was back and forth really trying to, kind of make a stew out of all of us, so that we weren't factioned off, with trying to make us more like one. And so it was necessary for me to be here. I didn't move to Nashville until I got my most recent opportunity to be chief operating officer.
Wow. So when people get into the industry, I keep telling people this industry, if you're getting in at a young age, so much of your career will be based on who knows you and who trusts you. If nobody knows you and nobody trusts you, you're screwed. If everybody knows you and everybody trusts you, you get to do whatever you want. And here you are, people trusting you where you're like, I got you. Come on over. I got you. Come on over. And they're like, she's got us. We're going to be fine. Like, you need that where people understand that you're kind of one of those people that makes things, work out for people. Otherwise you don't get to do that, right? You can be like, I got you. And they're like, no, you don't. You just failed me. Right. But you have the trust of people where you could pull people in and make this stew.
Yeah. It took time though. It took time, not everybody likes change. And, and the people who we had worked together, all the Franklin folks, that part, we were really super tight, but so were the same, those people at Santander and Guaranty Trust. So to try to blend differences and, trying to facilitate change, some people are more change resistant than others. Change had to happen. We were on a really big growth mode. Mm-hmm. So fortunately, I think we had a really pretty good thing going and a solid team being built when 2020 happened.
Wow. So were you COO in 2020 when that starts?
Just I had a conversation, and I think it was in the month of February of 2020, and I had committed to the job and the move. And I remember selling my house up in the Boston area, fortunately to somebody who was relocating. So I didn't lose the sale. And so I guess I probably sold my house around March 1st. I think things started getting shut down around mid-March, and I moved in May. So it was a year. Yeah.
And you run that, everything's booming, things are crazy, again, growing fast, doing everything, working, in many cases, tons of people working remotely. Talk to me about the most recent, how did that close out, or how did they deal with 2020, 2021, and then the fall of 2022, and now where we are right now? You're booming, you're going crazy. Everything's just keep your head screwed on straight as much as you can. And then everything stops almost in like a month. Everything comes to a halt.
Yeah, you know what? I feel like it didn't. I think you could see it coming. I felt like I could feel it coming. Because I can think of some of the bigger booms. I've been around long enough. I feel like after a really big boom, a lot of times it's like the faucet gets shut off. It seems to happen that way. And so yeah, we were going like gangbusters. We didn't. I guess I'll back up to answer your first question. Is we were ready to be remote. So all of the newer groups to the originals all worked from laptops, several remotely. We were set up to do it. So when 2020 happened, there were some people, yes, in some functions within the local offices, people we needed to get laptops and set up to work from home. But gosh, our IT team was amazing, got it done in, a couple of days when it became apparent. We were essential services, so we always had some people in the office. Certain things had to be done in person. But, I went to an office, I would say, I would drive myself to the office in Massachusetts by myself. I'd go work there because I realized after 30 days I had nothing but, stretchy waist pants on. I said, all right, enough. I got to get dressed, drive somewhere, and I'd be in the office alone. But we were working like crazy, like everybody else. And we weren't built or ready for that kind of volume, But I think everybody worked their hearts out and did the best they could.
Yeah. Yeah. I talk about it. It's kind of like you start seeing holes that you didn't know were there in the ship. And you're like, okay, somebody go put your finger on that hole. And like, somebody will plug that hole. And you're just trying to keep the ship together as the storm comes in, of the good storm of business, right?
It was a great storm. Yeah, it was.
The storm stops.
We were a little behind technologically. We still had some manual processes that would kind of gum up the works a little bit. But, we managed through. We had to be nimble. You had to try different things. You had to change. But, you did the best you could. With the service levels where we wanted them to be, certainly not. I mean, we had backlogs like everybody else. But yeah, and then we had a brand new LOS system, shortly thereafter, which was a little bit rough at the beginning, to say the least.
Yeah.
And everybody had the challenges of trying to find talent, and then try to train that talent and get people on board quickly enough to make a difference.
Yep. It's that massive growth. Like I just told this class I was teaching yesterday, I said, if you don't like massive booms and massive busts, you should probably not be in this industry. Because, just on this call, you've explained, how many times this industry goes big, then this industry goes down, then this industry. If you don't like that experience, this is probably, there's tons of other jobs that you can be stable all the way through retirement, but this definitely isn't one of them.
No, it's kind of the Wild West, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And now you are back on the market again. Where are you at right now?
Oh gosh, it's been interesting. So Guaranty Home Mortgage has been acquired by another company in Utah. There are some people, from the Guaranty group that went on. My job was not available. So I'm still trying to figure out what comes next. I'm at the point in my career that, and as you wait for that moment of clarity, I think I'm arriving at that decision in some ways in what I don't want to do rather than what I do want to do. And I don't think for me that I'm going to go back to work corporate America full time. I've had this great, I'm calling it soul rest, right? This freedom, throughout the summer. And just taking time to unwind it all. That's a long time to be doing one thing, to unwind it all, step away, do some reading, do some great stuff. I lived in an RV on the river for 3 months this summer. Just did some really different things. And it's been fantastic. I'm going to take a class, get myself ready to hopefully get on some boards. I'm part of EWA, like our friend Christy. And I'm in my mentorship year, so I've had the honor and privilege of meeting some really terrific women who are in the industry, several of whom are in the same place in their career as I am.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would love to consult or maybe be that person that could dive into a project and, work full time, but for a period of time and then step back away. So I do want freedom. I think I need a little bit more latitude than I've had in the past.
Well, I can tell you in my interactions with you, all of the times we've talked, even though it hasn't been many, you seem at peace. And that I think is a beautiful thing, having gone through all these things, this amazing career. And now you're just kind of like, yeah, let's figure this out. It's a good place to be.
It is.
How are the kids?
My kids are great, thanks. Yeah, they're good. My son's getting married December 2nd. My daughter's been married just a year. We're spread out,
Yeah,
but we all look forward to getting together soon.
it worked
But
out.
it did work out. 3 years ago, I took a big chance on myself and started my life over. And it's been like my eat, pray, love journey.
Yeah.
I call it my years of saying yes. It's been wonderful.
I love it. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for spending time with me today. This has been awesome. And I love every time I talk to people, I think like, what's the story people take away from this? What's the benefit they get? And I just think you've perfectly described the industry. You've perfectly described somebody going through it and all the other things that are happening in life kind of around the career as it happens. And it's such an interesting and amazing adventure you've been on. Part of it's just the story of the industry. A lot of people have the same experiences of like a company shuts down and then the next thing. But I love the way you looked at everything and that humbling. We interviewed a guy last week who, when the market crashed, he ended up working for a tanning salon, cleaning booths with a 16-year-old manager telling him he wasn't doing it right. And I'm like,
Yeah.
hey, like, people forget we get humbled in this business and then we get to have success in this business. And it's, if you struggle with humbling, again, not the right spot for you. So,
Well, you know what? And I guess I feel bad for people who can't admit that they have been, because I can't imagine that. I mean, how many people who have lived life haven't been or haven't experienced a humbling experience, right? Whether it's a bad relationship, getting let go from a job or whatever.
mhm.
And I think what's important is, what do you learn by it? And God, it's awful to have to swallow hard after something like that.
Yeah.
But as I said, it's different, because I always say I love right where I am, because if I could have had this little piece of me, and there's so much we could have talked about, but I have been probably one of at least in my own mind, I had the worst case of imposter syndrome. I experienced it throughout my career, but I was always pretty tough, right? Because I had my first, my marriage relationship toughened me up, maybe to a fault.
Right.
So when you keep that kind of big secret, you're not going to let anybody get to you. And, no matter what humiliation you might have felt, because I lived through, if you think about it, Me Too. I mean, all that stuff was real. It happened all the time. But having to grow up through that and all those, wrong turns here and there, they just bring you to who you are and who you become now. And I like this point in my life. And that's why I love mentoring. I mentor several young women. I have somebody in their 30s, 40s, 50s,
Wow.
And I do it through EWA, but also people I've worked with in the past.
That's so awesome.
I've had a great journey.
Wow. Are you going to be in Philly?
I am not.
Darn. Okay, cool.
If I am, it's because I'm going to be visiting my daughter. But no, I don't know what I want to do really in real life. But I do want to get on a board. I'm going to take a 5-week class, and I've been working. This sounds really stupid, but I've been working on trying to understand how to get through times that I feel uncomfortable. You know, I've learned to be comfortable being uncomfortable in a lot of instances, right? Because I had I was in a role that I wasn't comfortable in. I felt behind, I wasn't up to speed, and I know that. But I've been using my golf game, trying to understand why I choke in when it matters type of thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it sounds pretentious. I'm not that good. I'm a 17, but handicapped.
So you're better than me.
Well, and you never know. I hit 105 two weeks ago, right? So, you know, days happen. But I was in this singles tournament at a different golf course, you know, playing against a woman who was older than me, but she had a deadly short game. So I would always get there faster than her, pretty much, right? But she knew the course, and she had the putting down. She knew what everything was going to do. But I didn't just putt badly. I never got the speed. I kept leaving myself in situations. And I'm like, how, you know, in my own mind, and it's not in a pretentious mind, because you can't be pretentious in golf because I'm not that good.
Right.
I feel like I should have been able to win. And I couldn't understand it. And I don't know, through a conversation or whatever, but I figured it out. I need to learn to relax, right? So what happens when you have a bad shot? Well, all of a sudden you start to try to change your swing, right? So all of a sudden all my crap is going off, you know, to the right, because my club face is open, because I'm not turning. Right. So now I got to hit out of the trees or on top of roots. It makes a bad situation worse, but I'm really working on relaxing. So I've been purposely putting myself into selected drive, alternate shot, the hardest formats you can imagine, right? Just to kind of get over myself. And then I just did another singles match a couple weeks ago. So I'm really trying to work on that. So my next journey is going to be getting on a board. And that's a whole different level. That's, right? And I'm a little uncomfortable with it, but I feel like now I'm ready to do it.
Totally.
And I wish you luck in this next stage of your adventure.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Ken. Thanks for having me.